Hi everyone, welcome back to the Mitchell Brewery. My name's Clive and it's time for the brewing for the new season, for the 2013-2014 season. And I'm just getting started. I've got my boiled water cooling down, I've got my malt and my hops out, and I'm going to start brewing. So cheers guys, see how I get on. Now today I'm going to make a slightly smaller beer. I'm using up materials left over from last time. My boiler's only got about 6 litres in, which has been boiled up and it's now cooling down to 80. I've got a bunch of malt ready. Now if you remember, malt is where the sugar comes from for the brewing, so that's what the yeast converts to alcohol. I've got lager malt, crystal malt, chocolate malt, a bit of flaked barley, a little bit of roasted barley. I've got a caramalt, black malt and some flaked maize. In addition to that, I've got some hops. Now this is what provides the sort of flavour, the aroma, the bitterness to the beer. I've got Galena, Styrian Goldings, Chinook and Challenger. For those looking to start out in brewing, I've got a couple of recommendations. This is a book from Camera, it's British Rail Ale by Graham Wheeler, fantastic book. Here we go, it's got recipes, gives you the proportions. This one was 15 quid, fantastic. My first starter book. I've now moved on to this American book called Clone Brews, Recipes for 200 Commercial Beers by Tess and Mark Zematulski. This one said it's about $19. I think it cost me about 11 or 12 quid from Amazon. Again, this has, here we go, it's got a whole variety of beers. Also, starts off with lagers, woo boo hiss, and moves through to bitters and to IPAs, etc. And some classic beers here. And here we go, here's a Sierra Nevada Stout, that's an American beer. So this is a very good book. It's all in American proportions and volumes, but it does give litres and it does give the all grain method as well. So this is an excellent book. So what am I making today? Well, I'm making a version of Murphy's Irish Stout. I say version because I'm not doing the full volume and also using up bits and pieces, so I've modified the recipe a little bit. Now I've got a science background and I used to work in the labs years ago, and so I started this little brewing back when I first started. Let's have a look, when was it? Here we go, the first brew was in end of November 2009. And I've recorded all of the process. So I started with beer kits, then I moved on to the full mash all grain method. So that's where you use malt and hops, etc. So here we go. Here's a beer that I made back in 2011. Hop Back Summer Lightning. That's a good one. So that was brew number 8. Skip forward to today, and here we go. And this is the one I'm making today. So this is beer number 25 in my brewing career. So here we go, it gives you all the proportions of everything that I'm going to use, and when I start adding the hops as well. And then what I do, I just record the times and how much and volumes, etc. So that's the stage I'm at now. I'm just waiting for the water to cool down. I'm going to start adding the malt now to the mash tun. Now this is the mash tun. It's an insulated cool box with some pipework in it, and basically use this to steep the malt in boiled and cooled water to extract the sugar from the malt. Here you can see me weighing out the chocolate malt. Have a look at this. This is very dark looking stuff. Now basically malt comes from barley, and the barley is sprouted and then the sprouting stopped, and then the barley is kilned, so it's basically dried, and then that kilning process can be done at various temperatures, so we can end up with stuff which looks like this, fairly light looking. And we can also, if we increase the temperature, essentially we burn the barley, we can end up with stuff like this. So as you can imagine, this is going to give the beer a very dark colour. So this is where often the colouring comes from in different beers, just the different types of malt used. There we go, I've added all the malt to the mash tun. What you should do is give it a good old stir so that everything's all mixed together. Here we go, I'm just pouring off 5 litres of the boiled water and I'm going to add that to the mash tun. Here we go, I've added 5 litres of boiled water. I'm going to seal it up now for an hour and a half to let the water dissolve the sugar out of the malt. I filled up my mash tun and it's sealed, and I also like to wrap it up just to ensure that I keep as much heat into the mash tun as possible. One thing you must make sure is you keep your equipment clean. Now we can use this stuff, the steriliser cleaner, but find it's a little bit more on the expensive side, so I tend to use this stuff from Wilko's. Baby sterilising tablets. I think if it's good enough for babies, it's good enough for beer. Okay folks, while I'm waiting for the mash tun to do its trick, I'm going to rehydrate the yeast. Now, this is what I'm using. I'm using this yeast from Wilko's, only cost me £1.75. I've boiled some water. I'm going to have 110 mils into here. I'm going to let it cool to less than 30, then I'll add this and then you can see what happens later. Okay, that's my boiler. It's cool. It's boiled up to 100 degrees C. It's 11:45. I'm going to let it cool back down to 80. Half an hour's time I should be unwrapping this, and then next thing to do is to sprinkle all the water from here through the tap, through the grain, and then collect all the sort of sugary solution into this primary fermentation bin down here. So I'll show you how that goes. Okay everyone, while it's still sunny I thought I'd just show you this nice ornamental hop that my wife put in on the deck a few years ago. This is Humulus lupus aureus. Let's just zoom in on one of the little hop cones here. Now, apparently this stuff isn't really meant to be used for brewing, but I've picked about 2 litres of this stuff and I put it in the freezer. Here you go, this is where I'm keeping the hops, and I'm hoping that this will be useful for brewing. I shall try that one day. Here we go, Humulus lupus aureus in detail. There we go, you can see when these things feel a bit papery and they spring back into shape, apparently they're ready to pick. And you can see something called the lupulin, which is the really bright yellow stuff in there. That's where all the sort of flavours come from for beer. So I picked, like I said, 2 litres of this stuff, and then I dried it using a method from a website called the Mad Fermentationist. And basically you dry it in a microwave, and then when it's dry I stuck it in a bag in the microwave, so to be used at a later date. So watch this space to see how I get on with this homegrown hop beer. Water's now cooled down to less than 80 degrees C, and it's time to unwrap the mash tun. Here we go. Look at that. Stick your head in there. Really lovely malty smell. So that's ready now to be sparged. So i.e. sparging is where we pass the water from here through the pipe and sprinkle it across the grain and then collect the sugary solution at the bottom. Now the first bit we draw off will be quite cloudy. Look at that. I say quite cloudy. Remember that this has got lots of dark malt in it, so that's why it's looking incredibly black. So it's already starting to look like a stout. This stage you can have a bit of a taste. Oh, that's lovely. You can taste the malty goodness now. Don't worry about any germs or anything at this stage, because basically this is going to go back in the boiler, so it'll be totally sterilised again. So go away and have a taste. Or go ahead and have a taste even. Even though you can't tell because it's so dark, this will be full of sediment, so I'm going to tip this back into the top of the grain, and the grain itself will act like a filter bed and capture all those particles from going into your beer. Now I'm going to start capturing the sugary solution into the fermentation bin. If I turn the tap on, the water passes from here through the pipe and through the rows, and you can see basically now this is going to play, the water's going to play across the surface of the grain and then wash through the sugar from the grain into here, and basically all of the water in here will be passed through the grain, and that's then captured with that sugary solution. All of the water has been drained out of here through the mash tun, so it's been through the grain, and the sugary solution is all been drained into the primary fermentation bin. So we've got about 17 litres in here. Look how dark that is. At this stage this is known as sweet wort, W-O-R-T. Okay, the sweet wort is now back in the boiler, and it's about 60 degrees C at the moment, so I'm going to boil it back up, and at that point we'll add the hops. Here we go, the sweet wort is boiling, and it's now time to add the hops, all lined up there ready to roll. Here we go, I've got 5 different hops and I've got a schedule for addition. So at the start of the boil I'm adding 10 grams of Pilot, then I'm adding 10 grams of Chinook, then I'm adding 14 grams of Galena, and then the last 15 minutes of the boil I'm going to add 16 grams of Styrian Golding and 10 grams of Challenger. So here we go, just an update on how the yeast is getting on. It's been in here for a little while now and you can see it's fully rehydrated, so that's ready to be pitched into the beer later. Here we go, last 15 minutes of the boil. Here we go, there's some Styrian Golding going in, then there's going to be some Challenger, and it'll be into the boil here for the last 20 minutes, 15-20 minutes. This is the chiller. It's a copper coil that acts as a heat exchanger. It's connected up to the outside tap, and the water then comes in into the bottom of the coil, and it circulates round and then comes out the top and then down the drain when it's connected to the drain. This is extremely effective. This takes about 10 or 15 minutes to cool it down to less than 30, otherwise that would take quite a few hours. Just pop the chiller into the boiler and the boiling wort will sterilise the copper. Incidentally, at this stage, now the hops are in there, this is no longer called sweet wort, it's called bitter wort. Okay, the bitter wort is now chilled to below 30, and I'm going to pour it into the primary fermentation bin where it will spend the next week with some yeast to ferment away in the first stage. Smell that meat, malty goodness. Okay, all we have to do now is pitch the yeast into the bitter wort and we're done. And we'll come back to this in a week's time when it's done the primary fermentation brewing stage, and we'll be ready for the second stage. Okay, it's 8 days later and the primary fermentation stage is finished. We're just going to go and have a look and take the lid off to see how it's getting on. See, all the bubbling stopped. That's the last bit. Okay, let's have a quick peek inside the primary fermentation bin just to see. Oh, it's not looking too bad. Remember, this is only half a batch, so it's not a huge amount of excess yeast on the top of there. I've got 20 Grolsch bottles ready, sterilised, waiting to be filled up with beer. I know I bang on about it quite a lot, but always make sure your equipment's clean. This is the siphon sterilising, ready and waiting for siphoning the beer out of the primary fermentation bin. Now the next thing to do is to take the siphon and to put it into the beer and siphon through into the pressure barrel. I've got the siphon in the fermentation bin and I'll try and get as much of that out so the end is right at the bottom, and that will go through here into the pressure barrel. That's finished, and all we've got, you can see here, is the yeast packed in the bottom of the primary fermentation bin, and we've got about, obviously only less than half a barrel. Now this is called the primary fermentation bin because this is where the first stage of brewing takes place. Now in the pressure barrel, this is where the second stage of brewing takes place, and now in order for that to happen we need to add some sugar. So I'm going to add 2.5 ounces of sugar. What I normally do is I'll put this into a jug and then I'll dissolve it in beer, and it will go into the top here, and then I'll make sure all the sugar is then washed through into the beer. I've put 2.5 ounces of sugar into this measuring jug and I've put a bit of beer in. I'll swish it around a bit and then I'll just pour it in the top, and I'll keep doing that until I've washed all the sugar into the beer. Now ordinarily I'd leave the beer in here now to ferment, and in 3 weeks time it would be ready to drink. What I've been doing recently is been putting half of my beer into bottles at this stage, and that's called bottle conditioning, where we allow the secondary fermentation stage to take place in the bottle. But as I've only got half a barrel, I've decided that I'm going to put all of this into bottles and not bother with the barrel. So all of the beer should be bottle conditioned. Now I've got 20 bottles here, and I'm hoping I'll be able to fill all of these bottles. What I do when I'm bottle conditioning is I just give each of the bottles a little extra sugar hit, so just the tip of a teaspoon into the bottle, just to make sure there's a bit of sugar in there, and I'll fill that up with beer now and seal it up. All I do at this stage is use my measuring jug to transfer the beer from the barrel into the bottle. When you fill the bottle up, you'll get a bit of foam at the top, so just leave it for a few minutes and then you'll be able to top it up. In the end, luckily, I managed to get 23 bottles out of that barrel, so it's pretty good going. Okay everybody, that's it. Cheers then. Happy brewing. See you next time.